in the Fort Lauderdale studio. Adam Azer, Dave Richard, Jamie Eisenberg, and Ryan Wilson joining us from the With the First Pick podcast, NFL draft expert, terrific podcast host, friend of the program. What's up, Ryan? Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Y'all look very casual and like you're having fun down there in Fort Lauderdale. Adam, I'm glad to see you were able to be reunited with Dave, maybe Jamie to a lesser extent, but you guys look good.
Yeah, that was fun.
This is how it used to be, by the way, way back in the day. For all the new subscribers and viewers pre-YouTube, we were together every day. Then someone decided to move to New York, and now we're on Zoom from random offices.
Which is great.
And I've already stolen your wallet. It's good.
Can't be true. So first of all, for those of you listening right now,
check the thing is a monster.
If it sounds a little bit different today, we're in studio, got different mics on, so just thank you for your patience there. But hopefully it sounds good enough. I have a poorly worded trivia question for all three of you to start. Okay, so here's our poorly worded trivia question: how many times in the last 10 NFL drafts have we not had an edge rusher go in the top 5? Which, if you look at any mock draft, you don't see it. So how many times in the last 10 NFL drafts have we not had an edge rusher be drafted in the top 5?
I think I saw that there hasn't been one in the last 10 years in the top 8, if I'm not mistaken.
Incorrect.
So 0?
No, there's been one.
I don't think it's 0, but I don't think it's very.
Wait, you're saying
that there's been at least one in the first 7 picks?
No, I don't think that's true.
I'm sorry. You know what it is? It's a defensive player in the first 7 picks.
Oh, okay. No, specifically an edge rusher, top 5. Ryan, you got to guess? How many times have we not had that in the last 10 years?
I want to start with this. You are, in fact, correct. It is a very poorly worded question, but I'll go with 3.
What did he say, 3?
He said 3. I'll say.
I can't. I'm going to put my headphones on.
What?
I can't hear anything.
Ryan said 3. He's putting 3 fingers up on his camera. He's going to have to talk in sign language for the rest of the show. That's going to be great for everybody listening. I will say twice it's happened.
One time.
That's right.
Micah Parsons. It was 12th overall. Every other year in the last 10 years, we have had a top 5 pick on an edge rusher. Oftentimes like top 3.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. All right, so we're just a few days away. What's the latest buzz you're hearing, Ryan, as you're going to get ready for another mock draft, I'm sure? What's the latest?
Yeah, Jamie, Dave, you can relate to Adam what I'm saying here. But so today on Monday, what I think should happen, that mock draft came out. So that's something if you're looking for a way to kill time at work. I think the conversation
the traded the first pick.
The first pick has been traded. Back to Carolina. They're going to take a quarterback. No, but I think the conversation probably always starts with the quarterbacks, whether you're fantasy like you guys or just following the draft as a fan. And I think the 3 spots are taken care of at the top. I don't think the Patriots are trading out. I think they're just sort of seeing what may potentially come via a phone call as compensation to move down. But I think 4 quarterbacks going to go in the top 5. And Adam, I don't think that's ever happened. I think that'll be the first time ever in football history that we have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5 picks. And then the question becomes, how many more do we see after that? I think Michael Penix finds his way into the first round. I was talking to some teams over the weekend that think he is actually a second-round pick. And the follow-up was always, but that's going to be a great value in the second round, which led me to say, well, why wouldn't you just take him in the first round? So it just depends. And the thing I've heard about Michael Penix Jr. could be a Will Levis situation where if he gets past the middle of the first round, he does end up being there because there is no team that really needs a quarterback unless they're trading back up. A year ago, the Titans were considering trading back up into the bottom of the first round. They waited till pick 33 and got Will Levis there, and maybe that's Michael Penix Jr.'s fate. But I think when you talk about those teams after Minnesota at 12, you have Denver. At 13, you have Las Vegas. Maybe even a sneaky team like Seattle. I think there's an opportunity for those teams to consider quarterback in the first round, depending on what happens ahead of them, as we talk about all the time. So I think that's where the conversation starts for me is the quarterbacks and how many end up going. And also, of course, and this is something that I've been saying since January, how have we gotten to the point where we've convinced ourselves that JJ McCarthy is going to be really good based on such a limited sample size?
That's what I was going to say. I was reading Prisco, a little blurb from him about, this guy's shouldn't be a top 5 pick. And Is he Will Levis? That was my question, because there was some buzz about Levis this time last year going really high. I don't know if it was top 5, but
top 5. Yeah,
right.
Well, it was, speaking of Pete, that was his favorite quarterback in the class. Not that he said he should have gone first, but that was his favorite quarterback that he evaluated, which I know Ryan and Pete fought a lot about. His number 1 guy, right?
Well, listen, it's not McCarthy. So it feels like for every time you see McCarthy mocked in the top 5, there's someone who says, really? Why is he in the top 5? So I don't know. Should he? Someone's going to take him. It could be the Giants. Like, should we be excited about that from a fantasy perspective? Because I think, look, there's almost no chance all of those quarterbacks, 4 of them go in the top 5. There's almost no chance they're all going to be good. I'll take the over/under at
it's
2.5. I'll go under.
Right. Yeah. Because what's been the rate of first-round quarterbacks being successful in the NFL? It's been around 50%, depending on your definition of successful.
Yeah.
If we're talking about guys that make the Super Bowl, it's way lower than 50%. I think what is nice about McCarthy is that he's got like the mechanics down. He's got a good arm. The experience, you say it's limited. He was a 2-year starter for Michigan. That's a pro-style offense. He knew what he was doing a lot of the time. He had a great completion rate on 3rd down, played really well on those money downs. And his arm isn't as strong as Drake Mays or Caleb Williams, but it's still pretty good. And I think there's room for him to get even better. So I see what NFL teams might see in him. You know how it is. When a team needs a quarterback bad enough, they'll overpay. You and I have seen this a bazillion times. So everybody that follows the NFL. And so you say that there's going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 5 picks. Well, some of those teams in the first 5 don't need a quarterback. That's Arizona. That's the Chargers. There's going to be a trade in there. Someone's going to overpay to get into the top 5. Maybe 2 teams overpay to get into the top 5.
Well, I think, Ryan, I don't know how you're mocking it in terms of trades. I haven't seen your latest mock. I'm sorry. But, Minnesota, obviously, you mentioned them in terms of, I would guess, with the ammunition they have to move up. Like, do you think if the first 3 quarterbacks come off the board, being Williams, Daniels, and May, do the Vikings trade up to get JJ McCarthy?
It feels like it, right? Because why else would you trade a few weeks ago back into the first round to get the pick 23 from the Texans if you were just going to stay put and, take 2 offensive tackles or whatever? So you think that was the thinking there, that you want to leapfrog some of the teams that potentially might be interested in quarterbacks, basically the teams right behind them. And now you have more ammunition than the Broncos and more ammunition than the Raiders if they were interested in moving up for a quarterback. But Adam's original point about JJ McCarthy, the funny thing is I talked to 2 different teams last week, and one was like, I don't understand. This feels like Jim Harbaugh hype on JJ McCarthy. And the other one was like, and sort of touched on something Dave just said. They're like, I see it. And before the combine, because our buddy Rick Spielman was talking up JJ McCarthy because he's a winner. It's like, Rick, that's a terrible excuse to draft a guy top 5.
That's a Rick thing.
Yeah. And then, I had flashbacks to Jamie and Pete just harassing that poor man to death about Kellen Mond and Christian Ponder, but that's a conversation for another time. But the other thing that Dave just touched on about the 3rd downs, I went back and watched all of JJ McCarthy's 3rd downs, 3rd and longs, 3rd and 6 and more. To Dave's point, he had a better completion percentage than anyone except Bo Nix, except the difference was he was pushing the ball down the field. His average yards per attempt were higher than anyone else's. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. So you can see it, but you're only seeing it 40 times a year as opposed to Michael Penix Jr. seeing it 200 times a year because of all the things he was asked to do in a completely different offense.
Cheap plug. On the FFT Dynasty podcast stream, you're going to find a show that Heath did. I was on it, but Thor Nystrom was on it, and Thor is big time into JJ McCarthy. If you want a really good breakdown of JJ McCarthy, and Thor watches every quarterback, you can find out why Thor likes JJ McCarthy a lot.
Well, by the way, Rick Spielman. So I was listening to the With the First Pick podcast on the way to the office today, the tight end / offensive line preview. And there was a great line from Rick Spielman. Ryan, you compared Ben Sinnott to Dallas Clark. Do you remember what Rick said to you after you made that comparison?
Adam, I am a abused spouse at this point, so there's so many things that Rick says to me that I just say for therapy. What did he say in this instance?
He said, "Yeah, that's fine. No one cares." It was hilarious. I love your podcast. You're an amazing host. I want everyone to listen to with the First Pick before the draft, during and after the draft. Please check it out. It's terrific. I do have to promote one thing here, and we'll get back into the show. Our NFL draft contest. If you want in the podcast league, there's links now on Twitter. If you follow any of us on Twitter, Twix. to get in the podcast league, you have to guess the top 10. We're going to ask you who's going to be the first pick, who's going to be the second pick. You have to guess them in order. The team doesn't, I don't think the team matters. Usually it doesn't matter. I'm assuming that doesn't matter again this year. I haven't seen the spreadsheet, or the Google form. Anyway, just have to give us the top 10 in the NFL draft. Whoever gets the most right is in the podcast league. With that said, we're going to take a real quick break, come back with a lot more with Ryan Wilson right after this.
We need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
I got top fives from Ryan in each position. His top 5 quarterbacks are
Punter.
4 positions, sorry. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. We will also talk about the offensive lineman. I think it's pretty relevant this year. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy. So you do have Penix ahead of McCarthy. You want to tell us why you have Penix 4, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. We preach all the time when you talk to this is the podcast after all. We talk all the time about, okay, let's go and see how they played. Let's look at the tape or whatever you want to call it. There's a reason that Michael Penix Jr. was in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy, and I'm convinced, at least in terms of the media perception, NFL is a little different. But if Texas had been his last game, that semifinal game where he absolutely destroyed that Texas defense, and that was all over his tape in the fall, we would be having a different conversation. I think he's the best deep ball thrower in this class. I think he moves really well inside the pocket to buy time, and then he can throw off platform. I think he's a better athlete than we gave him credit for. We saw that in the Texas game. He tested really well when he ran at his pro day. The issues, of course, are the injury history, but he's been healthy. And he's a completely different player, by the way, for when he was at Indiana to where he is now, just in terms of growth as a quarterback. He's obviously not quite as mobile or athletic, but certainly plenty. And I talked to Rome Odunze at the Combine and talked to Troy Fautanu, who's a left tackle who's getting drafted in the first round. Both played with Penix, and they both said the same thing, unsolicited. Why are we not talking about Michael Penix Jr. as arguably one of the best quarterbacks in this draft class and easily a first-round pick? And that's the question I keep coming back to as well. So you know what you're getting in Michael Penix Jr., but I'll say this about JJ McCarthy and Drake May as well. They're both 21 years old. And when Michael Penix was 21 and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix were 21, they were not good football players, at least not where they are now. I think they're more consistent and better. And I think if you give both Drake and JJ that grace and give them a year and a half, 2 years to see where they are, I think they're going to be a lot better. But we're having the conversation now, and I think right now Michael Penix Jr. is a better football player, and that's why I have him just a hair ahead of JJ McCarthy, who in the fall I thought he was probably a late first, early second round pick, and I still sort of think that, but the league is going to take him 25 picks higher than probably what I think he should go.
I wouldn't mind Penix to Minnesota at all.
I have a follow-up. I really feel like he may have said this already, so you can make fun of me if he did.
Okay.
Michael Penix follow-up. I know he ran a really good 40, and I watched the Texas game, and I see him rolling out. I saw him actually scramble for like a 10-yard first down. I saw him throw on the move. But is he the least mobile? I mean, is he just a pocket guy, and is that why he might fall out of the first round?
I don't think that's why he'd fall out of the first round. I mean, I think he's probably in the same mobility category as Patrick Mahomes in terms of the frequency with which he gets out of the pocket and runs. Because I think Patrick ran a 4.78 or 4.8 or something. And Josh Allen did too, by the way. And Josh Allen, no one thinks of Josh Allen as a pocket passer. They think of him as a bulldozer. And in the open field, he runs away from people. That Steelers game in the playoffs was an example of that. I just think that we see Penix in the pocket a lot, didn't run a whole lot. Sort of like C.J. Stroud, by the way. Is he a better athlete than C.J. Stroud? Yeah. It's probably close. And C.J. we know can win in the open field if he needs to. I just think Penix was more focused on staying in the pocket, and it helps when you have 3 guys going to be top 100 picks. You're throwing lasers to those guys, and a fantastic offensive line where a ton of guys are going to get drafted in a really good run game. I think he's a pretty good athlete. We didn't see a lot of it.
I don't think teams are going to pass on him for any lack of mobility.
Right. That's what I.
But he's not like Jaden Daniels.
No, obviously I know that, but I think I think actually the Stroud comparisons are interesting because Stroud I think maybe showed a little bit more elusiveness. It's not necessarily scrambling. It's the ability to get out of the pocket.
That's what Ryan did say that.
Yeah.
That, he throws on, he moves well in the pocket, and I think that's a big difference than having to be mobile.
Yeah. All right, let's get to other positions here. I know we don't have Ryan all day. He's got stuff going on all day. So
Well, it's because your pre-show stuff was 45 minutes.
I actually thought I was waiting on you guys. We were waiting on a background. I thought you guys were chatting. That's what I thought. I didn't realize you were waiting on me.
First you lie about getting 3 stripes in your head, and now this.
A running back here, looking at his top 5: Jonathon Brooks, Trey Benson, Brooks out of Texas, Benson out of Florida State, Jaylen Wright out of Tennessee, Blake Corum out of Michigan, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. No MarShawn Lloyd on there. He's number 2 for Emory, I believe. I think MarShawn Lloyd was number 2 for Chris Trapasso.
You love him too.
I did do a top 5 for our fantasy stuff. He was 5th for me too.
Who's MarShawn Lloyd? Okay. So I'm wondering if, Dave, you're finding maybe a lack of consensus at the position.
Sure.
And maybe for fantasy purposes, is it just going to matter landing spot?
Of course it's going to matter on the landing
But
spot.
I know it always matters, but sometimes the prospect is so good that it doesn't matter. But are we
There
talking
isn't a
different
guy
there?
at the running back position, at least I think, that isn't someone that can transcend a team's run game.
Mhm.
I think all these guys have flaws, even Brooks, even Benson. I think those 2 are the ones that have the fewest flaws. I'll take Benson a little bit ahead of Brooks just because he's got a little bit more speed to his game. I think he can improve as far as his physicality goes, and he's almost as good of a pass catcher as Brooks. Brooks might be the best pass catcher in the class. Benson's got some good hands too.
Brooks is my favorite. I wish he was healthy. Hopefully he is, but we know what that position in the history coming off of ACL tears, and I know you could say Breece Hall and how he performed, but he wasn't the best runner. He was a great fantasy asset because of what he did as a pass catcher. But the flip side of that is obviously Javonte Williams and what he looked like. And again, we're not talking about the same caliber of player here, but I feel like if Brooks was healthy, he would be. I think I know you're saying Benson. For me, he'd be the consensus one. It feels like that's kind of where everybody's at, despite the injury, and I'm hoping we get to middle of the season next year, no matter where he ends up, that we could be talking about a similar Breece Hall type impact.
And let's be real, if Jonathon Brooks goes to Dallas and Trey Benson goes to like Cleveland or Carolina, where his career is going to be limited,
sure,
slam dunk,
Yeah.
it's Brooks. He'll be the top guy for fantasy.
Torn ACL for Jonathon Brooks in November. All right, so what's your take, Ryan, on the running back class? And do you see a transcendent talent that doesn't even matter where he goes, or is it all about the landing spot for these guys?
Yeah, Adam, I'll start with MarShawn Lloyd because I think teams have him as a 3rd-round pick. And I'll be honest, I struggle with figuring out where to place these running backs after you get past the first 2 or 3. And even like last year, I struggled with Zach Charbonnet, and I was talking to a scout, and he was like, no, Zach Charbonnet's really good. And then we watched him a lot in the fall because we talk about the rookies as well on the podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's an absolute animal. And the way he played for Seattle made a lot of sense in terms of why they took him where they took him. So MarShawn Lloyd, I think, is probably going to be a top 100 guy. Even I think I have him in the 4th round. So a little difference there. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as I do annually, when we were on set together with Breece Hall and Jamie threw me as squarely under the bus as you could throw someone. Telling Breece Hall that I was
trying to get a reaction out of him.
We got a reaction that almost included some violence, as it turned out. But Breece Hall took it very personally, and as close as you are to Jamie, Adam, he turned to me and looked like he was about to rip my head off. So that was fun. Turns out he was right. He's a good player.
What happened was Ryan had Ken Walker as the number 1 running back that class, and obviously Walker's been a star as well. So I said, "Hey, Breece, he's got you number 2. Why should you be number 1?" He just goes. Ryan goes, "Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that."
That was great. You said you have Lloyd in the 3rd round, or you have him in the 4th round, but you hear people have him in the 3rd round. How many running backs do you think are going to get drafted in the 2nd round?
I think right now, Trey Benson, also another guy with a serious injury history. He had that serious injury at Oregon, and you wouldn't know it to watch him play last year. And I think Jonathon Brooks does go. Jonathon Brooks is my running back 1, but as you guys have talked about, he has the ACL, and that certainly, those are conversations you're having. All right, when's he going to be ready? Even if you had it in November, is he going to be 100% in September? Probably not. And as these things happen, usually it takes about 8 to 12 months after the injury for you to sort of get back to the form you were used to seeing, because Saquon, for example, I mean, this Azer is a Giants fan. Saquon wasn't nearly himself until he started to trust that his knee was going to hold up, and then he seemed to turn the corner. So I think Trey Benson, Jonathon Brooks, Jaylen Wright will be interesting because of the speed. He hasn't been asked to do a lot in terms of, doesn't have a lot of carries on the old on the car frame there. And I think he has a chance to go in round 2, but more likely probably round 3 with someone like Blake Corum and then MarShawn.
He faced no heavy fronts. I mean,
who?
Jaylen
Wright, right.
Yeah, least amount of 8-man fronts.
Yeah, 4.38 40 for him. I think he's becoming one of the more interesting prospects because that's like a serious riser here. People love the athleticism. Talk to me a little bit more about Jaylen Wright out of Tennessee, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, he's an absolute burner. He's a one cut and go guy, and then in the open field, that's a wrap. And the 4.38's fun. You don't need that to be a good running back. You can run 4.65. Braylon Allen ran in the 4.6s, and you watch his highlights, and he's running away from guys down the field consistently. He doesn't play as big as he's listed, but in terms of Jaylen Wright, he's a guy. I start here. I start with two teams when I talk about skill position players. How would they look in San Francisco, and how would they look in Kansas City? And then you sort of work your way back, and then you end up with how would they look in Pittsburgh with Matt Canada. Unfortunately, Matt Canada's gone, so you can't watch that train wreck in slow motion anymore. But you try to figure out the extremes and then see where they fit. And I think a lot of running backs would have success in Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid's system, but it feels like Jaylen Wright, what he brings athletically, and the fact that he doesn't have a lot of carries, it's something that you get excited about because in the open field it's a wrap. Now you have to get him in the open field, and Jamie talked about it. He didn't face a lot of stack boxes, but he did a lot with a little at Tennessee. Tennessee wasn't exactly Alabama or Georgia. And a lot of times he was making guys miss in the hole and then ripping off 10, 15, 20-yard gains. So that translates, especially when you're playing against SEC competition.
You brought up the Giants. I just wanted you to know, you said I'm a Giants fan. If the Giants are on the clock, and I've said this I listen to your podcast. You don't listen to this one. That's fine. I said this on the show. If the Giants are on the clock and Malik Nabers is available to them and they do not take him, I'm done with the Giants. So first thing to you, can I be a Steelers fan? Is there room can I get a towel, I guess? And then let's start talking about the wide receivers here a little bit, Ryan. And you have Harrison 1, Nabers 2, Odunze 3. It gets more interesting after that. Brian Thomas 4, Adonai Mitchell 5. But yeah, can you spare a towel for me?
Yeah, I mean, aim higher. Just like I said, go for Kansas City and make it easy on yourself so you can enjoy.
I don't think Heath and I can be on the same.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, the
Heath
back. But you know what? I think I've heard that the Giants have done a lot of work on quarterbacks, but for quarterbacks after the first round. So I think that Malik Nabers makes a ton of sense there. I don't think you go offensive line. I think you take Malik Nabers if he's there, or you take I would imagine, not wanting to speak for you, Adam, but you might be super excited about Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, being there.
Yeah.
Should a team decide to trade up for either way. And I think Rome Odunze is not a bad third place consolation prize because some teams have him as wide receiver 2. So, yeah, you have to take a wide receiver there. You have to give Daniel Jones one more chance. And I think if that's the plan, yeah, I agree. At the words coming out of my mouth, it's like, well, do you have to really? But if you're going to give Daniel Jones one more chance, at least give him somebody to throw the ball to.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a win-win for the Giants either way if they take a receiver, because if they give Daniel Jones a stud wide receiver and he fails, the next quarterback that they take next year gets that wide receiver. So it makes a lot of sense. And I think all the talk about them going after McCarthy is to try and drive another team to trade in front of them to get McCarthy so that Nabers falls to them at 6.
I hope so. I just don't understand. Does anybody think McCarthy is a better prospect than Nabers? I mean,
it comes down to what you need.
No, but it should be, unless you're so sold on the quarterback.
But
I understand
not, because then Marvin Harrison would probably be.
But
because I think a lot of people think Harrison is the best or second best prospect in the draft.
So he should go in the top 2.
Yeah, okay, but he's not going to go. But no one's going to.
But Washington doesn't need.
Exactly, that's my point.
Harrison as much as they need.
Right,
Daniels or Drake.
You can go a little bit off of overall rankings, but I don't know. McCarthy to me, I can't. I don't know why a team would take McCarthy over Harrison.
In your case, is McCarthy an upgrade over Daniel Jones, and that's the question. And so it's a matter of like the Vikings or the Broncos or the Raiders moving up because they feel like McCarthy is an upgrade over what they have.
Yeah,
that's a different story. The Giants don't necessarily have to view McCarthy, whether they do or they don't, as a significant upgrade over Daniel Jones to either A, draft him if he falls to 6, or, which is crazy to me, to move up to 4 or 5 or 3 to go get him. Like that would be a little odd if they do that. I could see those other teams, because they're so quarterback starved, especially in a situation, let's say, where the coaching situation may not be fully entrenched. Does Tevin O'Connell have the leeway to, if they lose another season, to survive? It
just seems like we've got a gift at wide receiver this year with 3 of these guys. If you take an unaccomplished quarterback. He's won the national championship, but
just doesn't have the traits.
Well, no, but he hasn't thrown a lot of passes.
That doesn't make him a slam dunk.
Right. He's not a slam dunk. You better get that right. And it's not just the Giants. Any team that is taking McCarthy, any of the 4 guys over these receivers, right? Or not Caleb Williams, any of the other 3, like, you better get it right. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Right? Because these are wide receiver has become a very important position in the NFL.
But again,
it's a $30 million position.
Yeah. But the flip side of that, though, is, and Ryan can attest to this, is it's such a deep class. And yes, while these 3 guys are in a tier of their own, you take the swing at the quarterback and then hope to come back later in the draft and find a Tank Dell or a Puka Nacua or something. And again, those are rare. But as we've seen, the first-round wide receivers aren't slam dunks either. Again, these 3 feel like they should be, which is why they're being, mocked in the top 10. Mm-hmm. But, we've seen Jalen Reagor. We've seen, these guys that have failed because they get a little overhyped.
All right. So, Ryan, if you had, the 5th, 6th pick, you don't have to be a specific team. You don't have to be the Chargers. But if you had a spot where you were in position in both round 1 and round 2, I think I asked this of Trapasso, but to get a quarterback and a wide receiver, how would you do that? Would you go quarterback, not Caleb Williams, in round 1?
So, if he's the Patriots, for example?
Or maybe you like Jaden Daniels. So maybe we're talking Drake May and beyond, right? Like, do you go Drake May and Xavier Worthy, or do you go Malik Nabers and Bo Nix, or whatever combination you want? How do you get wide receiver and quarterback, Ryan?
Well, I think the starting point is you look at recent history. Let's start there. How many second-round quarterbacks have been good, right?
That's a great point.
So you guys just talked about you hit less than 50% of the time on the first-round quarterbacks. So you can monkey around and take Bo Nix if you want to, if you think you can fix him, if you're Sean Payton or whomever, and that's fine. But typically those things just don't work out. So I'm taking a flyer. And Jamie, you touched on Michael Penix going to how you like the idea of him going to Minnesota. I love any of these young quarterbacks going to Kevin O'Connell, because Kevin O'Connell, look what he did with Josh Dobbs last year. Josh Dobbs literally stepped foot off the bus and went out there and won a few football games and looked
it helps when you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson.
Not if you're who was the backup that was super terrible that couldn't throw a completion. Like, not if you're that guy. I can't remember his name. He played for the
guy who was an 1.5. Yeah. Jaron Hall.
Yeah.
No, the other one, the veteran.
Oh, Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins.
Right.
Oh, Nick Mullins had huge numbers.
He was
throwing for
Nick Mullins was
yards.
Jameis Winston. He was 30 30. He was on pace for that.
But to answer your question, and I don't mean to dump on Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins, shout out to you. My point is, I think I'm taking even a JJ McCarthy higher than I'm going to take Rome Odunze or Malik Nabers. Now, the problem becomes, and this is where the Bengals were smart and part lucky. They got Joe Burrow, and then they circle back in the next draft, I think it was. They could have had Penei Sewell, which made sense, or Jamar Chase. And they're like, you know what? We're going to go with Jamar Chase and see what happens. And it ended up being the right call. But they already had the quarterback there. So I think I'm taking quarterback first almost always. And then I'll circle back, especially in this class, and get a wide receiver. And I don't know if you guys have talked about him. I'm guessing you have. And Dave and I saw him at the Senior Bowl. But one of my favorite players in this draft class is 5'11", 189, Ladd McConkey. I think he is going to be – I think he's better than some of the wide receivers that will get drafted ahead of him in terms of coming in right away and being productive. And I love the idea of him going to Buffalo late in the first round. And I love the idea, even better, of him going to Kansas City with the last pick in the first round, because he is going to give you – I don't want to oversell it. Not Puka Nacua type production. He's not going to block like Puka, but I think he has an opportunity to be on the field enough to impact games and put up more production than some of the guys that get drafted ahead of him at wide receiver.
2 questions on McConkey. Number one, how do you feel about McConkey, Ryan, as far as a target 12-plus yards downfield? And I know that he lined up wide the majority of the time, so he had a lot of those targets at Georgia. And then number 2, he had a lot of minor injuries over the course of his career. How do you weigh that with his overall game when considering him as a late first-round pick?
The injuries are the big thing for sure. And I was talking to a wide receivers coach about that last week, and he goes, he said, and I agree with this too, he's the best route runner in this class. Like, it may not even be close. Dave talks about him playing outside,
I think it's
but
close.
He wins on short routes, and the separation is mind-boggling. Intermediate routes, they're deep routes that he runs, stutter goes, in which cornerbacks that get drafted in the first round have broken ankles trying to stay in phase with him. That stuff is what makes me excited. Like A.D. Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr. are insanely physical specimens and athletes, and they've done some special things on tape, but not at the consistency with which we've seen Ladd McConkey do it. But to Dave's point, Ladd is also 4 or 5 inches shorter and 20 to 30 pounds lighter, and did struggle with injuries last year. He and Brock Bowers didn't play for long stretches, and that's in part why that offense struggled at times. But if he's healthy, he doesn't have to be wide receiver 1. Even if he goes to Buffalo, they have Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, so you can sort of divvy up the carries. But Travis Kelce's wide receiver 1 in Kansas City. So even if Rashee Rice isn't playing for long stretches, and we don't know what his future is going to be, there are opportunities for him, Ladd McConkey, to come in and hit the ground running, I think, more effectively and quicker than what we saw from Rashee Rice, who didn't really have the light come on until felt like middle to second half of the season for the Chiefs.
Yeah. He's your third down winner. He's a guy who's going to be open constantly on third down. If it's 3rd and 8, he's running a route where he's going to get open 9 yards downfield. He's exactly that type of guy.
Yeah.
And because he's got good speed with him, he's got upside. But I just don't know if people necessarily see that or even saw it enough when he was at Georgia. And whether or not he can get a little bit more muscle on his frame, does that slow him down a little bit? That's always going to be a question. But great hands. I think he's the 2nd best route runner in this draft. You got to give credit to Marvin Harrison as far as that goes. But he's going to be an impact player, especially in fantasy leagues, full PPR. That dude could have 70 catches as a rookie, no problem.
Just give me your thoughts overall on the wide receivers after the top 3. Last year, we had 4 straight come off the board, beginning 20th overall with Jackson Smith and Jigba. How would you compare? You have Brian Thomas 4, you have Adonai Mitchell 5. McConkey, obviously, you're very high on. Xavier Worthy, we mentioned. I mean, it's a lot of really exciting names.
Yeah. Roman Wilson.
Pearsall.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Pearsall, a lot of buzz about him. Roman Wilson, you said, and Malachi Corley, et cetera.
There's a lot of interesting receivers.
Yeah, there really are. How would you compare after the top 3, to the 4 guys who went in the first round last year? That would be JSN, Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston, and Jordan Addison. I got it.
Yeah,
go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think Marvin, Malik, Rome are all going before last year's top 4. Then it gets interesting. I think Zay Flowers was small, and Jordan Addison was small too. And I think sometimes we let that cloud our judgment in much the same way we let like Brian Prancer in a 4.58 cloud the fact that he's a first-round pick, but that's another conversation. So I think I'm taking Marvin, Malik, Rome, and then probably Jordan. Zay had some drops. I think they were just focus drops. I think he's going to be fine. And after that, I would circle back and come back to Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, and then go on down the list. So those 2, Quentin Johnston would be a second-round pick all day long. JSN would be a second-round pick. He got off to a slow start in Seattle after overcoming some injuries early. He would be a second-round pick in this class all day long. And in terms of a name, you guys mentioned a bunch of names. One name I'll mention as well, who was in a sort of a weird offense in Florida State in that he wasn't asked to run a lot of the routes that he'll be running in the NFL, is Keon Coleman. He ran a 4.61 at the combine. Like, oh boy, here we go. He also tested faster than any wide receiver in the gauntlet drill, and he plays fast. And when you go back and watch his Michigan State tape, he transferred last year, he is running NFL routes, and he is running away from people. He was just a contested catch machine, sort of Randy Moss and guys last year at Florida State when given the opportunity. I think he had 2 drops last season. They both came in the last game of the year against Louisville, and he's a basketball player. He hasn't played a ton of football. I think he has a chance, and he just turned 21. I mean, there are a bunch of ifs with Keon. He turned 21 like a month ago. I think 2 or 3 years from now, he could be really special, and I don't care about that 4.61 at all.
I think I'm back in on Keon Coleman.
Yeah.
I think I'm off. I don't care about the 40.
Well, you got to see where he goes. How would you feel about him if Carolina made him their pick in round 2?
Yeah, I don't know. I would
Not
be
awful.
somewhat optimistic. about it.
Long term, no. But for
Right.
2024,
I mean, a lot of these guys, if they're not the top tier,
yes.
you're not expecting a lot in the first season. I mean, again, we keep saying, oh, Tank Dell and Puka Nacua. It just doesn't happen. I mean, typically it takes a while. You get a little bit of a flash at the second half of the rookie season, and then moving into their second year is when you start to see the upside and the potential. I know you're always going to say 900 yards. Maybe we skewed that a little bit with the 17th game, but that's when you start to see those elite level guys.
Yeah,
It's also-
I don't think I'm assuming Keon Coleman, no matter where he goes, is probably not going to have a 900-yard season. But the fact that, as Ryan said, yes, the 40 was really slow, but the GPS stuff, the other testing, the gauntlet drill we've already talked about.
watch him play.
He blew it away.
And again,
So,
Ryan brought up,
with him.
he goes to Buffalo. They surprise us. There's going to be somebody in the first round that surprises us.
Right.
If Buffalo likes him better than Mitchell or Worthy or whoever's going to be at the back end or Thomas,
Or a good opportunity, right?
right?
And that's what it's all about.
where Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, while they are somewhat established, they're smaller guys. Whereas Coleman can come in and be that alpha type of guy. Hopefully not like Quentin Johnston, who we thought was going to be one of those type of players, bigger physical receiver, but he just hasn't materialized. So it's going to be, a little bit of a guessing game, but, we'll be more excited about it fantasy-wise, obviously, if he ends up in a situation like the opportunity to be a number one guy with an elite quarterback.
And that's what happened to Nacua at the beginning of his career. Cooper Kupp was out to start the season. The Rams really liked what they saw in Nacua during OTAs and then in training camp. He got that opportunity. Same thing with Tank Dell. Took him a little bit longer than Nacua, but he got opportunities to play in a major role in Houston's offense, and he had a good quarterback to go with it. So we're looking for all those check boxes to get checked off. And when they are, whoever that receiver is, whether it's Coleman or any other name that we've dropped in the last 7-8 minutes, it's that opportunity that's going to make the difference for fantasy purposes. You just got to be able to see through it, which is why, like, if Chicago gets Odunze and it's DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze, it's going to break my heart this year that Odunze won't get the target share that I hope he would get if another team took him.
Hey, Ryan, how do you feel about Ricky Pearsall? Where are you on him?
I'm laughing, but I'm laughing because Rick Spielman is the biggest. You would think Rick Spielman was related to Ricky Pearsall, the way he talks that young man up. I talk up Ladd McConkey. If we're going to do the Wes Welker wing of the conversation here, I talk up Ladd McConkey, and he talks up Ricky Pearsall. But he's good, man. He ran in the 4.4s. That was a white wide receiver joke, by the way. You guys can laugh.
Yeah, I got it.
He ran in the 4.4s. He had a really good Senior Bowl, and he was in person more athletic and twitchier than I thought he was, but he also has some really good tape from last year. The quarterback play wasn't quite as consistent. Graham Mertz was okay, but Anthony Richardson was a lot of fun the year before. He's going to be a second round pick all day long. And I think when we did Rick and I did a 3-round mock draft on the podcast last week, he had him going 33rd to the Carolina Panthers, I believe. To which producer Debo's response was, Rick, he'd probably be there 39, but okay. But I think the point is top 40, top 50 picks. Pearsall could certainly be off the board. He's experienced. The other thing that's sort of funny, and I like to bring this up to our buddy Pete Prisco, is that Jaden Daniels, Johnny Wilson, Ricky Pearsall were all at Arizona State and Rashad White was there for a minute, I think, on the front end, and that team was terrible. I don't know how you do the math
Ayuk
on
was
that.
there for Daniel's first year.
In 2019, I just saw a video of Daniel throwing to Brandon Ayuk in 2019, and Ayuk is in his 5th year in the NFL, and Daniel's about to get drafted.
Yeah. There you go. So, but
he was a true freshman starter for them.
All right, I'm going to ask Ryan a tight end question after this break. I'm going to ask you a dynasty question. You're going to love it. Would you rather have, wait for the break to answer, Brock Bowers or Sam LaPorta? We'll find out how Ryan feels about Brock Bowers after this break on Fantasy Football Today.
The best couch potatoes come from Pluto TV country.
And these taters, they like all sorts of different things.
Survivor Channel, Ink Master Channel.
If it's got a spaceship in it, I'm probably watching it.
3 channels dedicated to CSI.
Whatever mood you're in, it's going to be easy watching.
Back here on FFT. All right, so Ryan, let's talk about the tight ends here. Bowers is your number one tight end, followed by Ben Sinnott, Theo Johnson out of Penn State, Jatavion Sanders out of Texas, and Cade Stover out of Ohio State. But yeah, so if you're doing if you have a dynasty league and you need to roster a player for the rest of his career, basically, and you're just looking for the best fantasy production, would you take Sam LaPorta or right now, without even knowing which team he's going to be on, Brock Bowers?
Sam LaPorta. And when you said it, I didn't even hesitate. It was Sam LaPorta right away. And I love Brock Bowers. He's 241. He didn't run. I don't care about any of that stuff. He plays bigger than 241. There's GPS data of him running in the high 20-mile-per-hour range as he sprints into the end zone against SEC competition. But the thing about Sam LaPorta is you know what you got. Like, there's no squinting and having to figure out what you have. And he's going to be in that, at least for one more year, that Ben Johnson offense, which is incredibly high-powered. Jared Goff is a top 12 quarterback, maybe higher than that. So everything's clicking. If Brock Bowers goes to the Panthers, for example, as you guys mentioned earlier, we don't know what we're getting there. He could be misused and miscast in much the same way a lot of those players were last year. So, yeah, I'll lean with Sam LaPorta. By the way, the other underlying story there, Adam, is that you can get tight ends in the second round. You don't have to draft them in the first round, and you can get huge value. And that's sort of the talking point as to why, even though I think Brock Bowers is like 6 or 7 on my big board, and I routinely have him going pick 18-ish, which is where the Bengals currently sit, and then some point between 18 and 32 or whatever, even though he's a top 10 talent.
All right, so then after Bowers, we had 3 tight ends last year go in the top 35, Kincaid, LaPorta, and Michael Mayer. How many tight ends from this class would you rank ahead of any of those guys?
Brock Bowers. And then after that, it gets sort of muddy. Teams are higher on Case over than I am. He has a chance to go in the second round, but he's more of he's still growing into the role. He's a defensive player that moved over to tight end a few years ago. And the athleticism is there. And, he's going to give you something as a blocker. And then after that, I think when things are going to really heat up in terms of how the league views these guys, even though I have them ranked a little higher, is going to be in round 3. Ben Sinnott, we talked to him at the Combine. Teams would ask him who he compared his game to and who he fashioned himself after. And Sam LaPorta was the name that came up. And you see that in his game. He had a really good Senior Bowl as well, and a surprise because you get to the tight ends sort of later as you go through the draft process. You know about the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, and then when you start watching tight ends, there's some pleasant surprises, and Ben Sinnott was one of those. Jared Wiley out of TCU is another guy. Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona State. And these are all guys that I'm mentioning not as blockers, but the guys who are going to be assets in the pass game early on as rookies. And, maybe they catch 10 to 20 passes, but there's going to be glimpses of things that make you feel good about in the same way you felt good about Musgrave and Kraft and Green Bay as rookies. I think with Jatavian Sanders, why you would draft him in fantasy, and me not knowing anything about fantasy, but knowing something about football, he doesn't block. So if he's out there on the field, he probably is going to be targeted in the pass game. So that's something to keep in mind. And he's a good athlete
too.
He's probably one of the best athletes among this class after Brock Bowers. And then finally, Theo Johnson, I like a lot at Penn State. He's a more complete tight end, a little bigger. So, 6'5", 6'6", 265, ran really well. And I think he's dual threat in that he can block and catch. But I don't know how that makes you feel if you're trying to draft someone for fantasy.
Yeah, just one last question for me about the tight ends. When I look at your tight ends and your tight end rankings and then others in the industry, how much is weighted pass catching ability versus blocking ability? So if a fantasy player is looking at your tight end rankings, which again are Bowers, Ben Sinnott, Theo Johnson, Jatavian Sanders, Cade Stover, what percentage of that is their ability to catch the ball, put points on the board?
That's actually a good question, Adam. I actually never thought about it in terms of that, but I would say probably maybe 65 production, 35 just ability to block, because a lot of times these tight ends are lining up in the slot. Sometimes they're lining up outside. Brock Bowers lined up in the backfield. And one of the things we talked about Brock Bowers from 22 to 23 was that how much he improved as a blocker. But again, if you're the Jets at 10, you don't necessarily care that he's blocking. You want to make Aaron Rodgers happy, although he could have used some protection, ironically enough. But you want him to be able to stretch the field vertically, and that's what Brock Bowers gives you. So I think it's weighed more heavily towards the offensive production down the field than blocking, unless you're strictly drafting a blocking tight end, in which case you're going on day 3 anyway.
I think that's why we see a lot more 12 personnel is, you have a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end, you know, and so that's what teams are looking at, which of these guys are going to be playmakers, which of these guys are going to be more complete tight ends, if you want to use that term, and then which guys are going to be more the Mercedes Lewises that you can catch a touchdown, but you're really there to be a 6th offensive lineman.
For 15 years. Speaking of offensive line.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, right. Speaking of offensive line, right, I don't know. It seems like, if you look at mock drafts, the most sure thing is Caleb Williams to the Bears. Maybe the second most sure thing is Joe Alt to the Titans, right? Yeah. And they've obviously added, they've added talent this offseason with Pollard and Ridley, and they got Levis, and they got Hopkins.
Right? Barry at center, yep.
They've got exciting pieces here. How much would it move the needle? Rookie linemen, it's tough to guess what their impact's going to be, but how much would it move the needle for you if the Titans do, in fact, at 7 overall, take maybe more an NFL-ready guy, Joe Alt, plug him right in at offensive line?
Oh, I think when you look at the Titans, really the guy that has the biggest room to jump is Will Levis, because you add Calvin Ridley, they kept DeAndre Hopkins. You hope to get more out of Traylon Burke. They have 2 guys that can catch the ball in the backfield. They're talking about maybe upgrading the tight end, which I think stinks because I'm a Chico Conco guy. But, you give that guy protection. And, we saw the highs, that Atlanta game, 4 touchdowns, he was a monster, and then clearly he struggled the rest of the way. Got
the Steelers game too, Jamie. He lit up the Steelers pretty good. He should have won that game.
Yeah, he
I'm not gonna be a Steelers
statistically.
fan,
he did not.
He had moments, and I think that's what you see is clearly the people who liked him. Pete Pearsall, for example, who said the last year at Kentucky was a lot of muddy pockets. That's a Pearsall phrase. Just playing through injuries, not a lot of talent around him, and then. Any quarterback, we put these guys in ideal situations. You see, like Ryan was saying, you put a running back on Kansas City, you put a running back on San Francisco, and then start to scale backwards. Well, you put Will Levis in a great situation. We know he's going to have one of the best offensive line coaches in Brian Callahan, in Bill Callahan. And Brian Callahan now comes in with a more offensive mindset maybe than Mike Vrabel. And now you start to see, okay, some concepts that change. Talent is better. Hopefully a year of experience after getting beat up and going through all that. So to me, he's the one that has the biggest chance to grow. You know, if there was one running back, I think we could say, okay, an offensive lineman would change things dramatically, but we're looking at two guys that are going to probably split work. And then really the receivers, you kind of know what you're getting. You know, an aging DeAndre Hopkins, a guy that's, you know, entering the end of his prime, and Calvin Ridley's coming off an inconsistent season. Those guys are more borderline number 2, more likely number 3 fantasy options. But there's a lot to like about where Will Levis can get to. You know, and I think when we talk Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues, that's where his biggest room to grow will come. You know, guy will be drafted as a number 2 guy, but could end up being, you know, a top 12 caliber type of quarterback.
But I would feel the exact same way about Will Levis, as Jamie said, even if they don't draft Joe Alt, because they've got Bill Callahan there, and he's really like a force multiplier as far as coaches go when it comes to the offensive line. You think about that Browns offensive line that he was working with before he went with his son to Tennessee. Man, they had a lot of good talent to begin with, but he really stepped it up. And when they were healthy, they were a monster front 5. I think even if the Titans were to trade down or take a defensive player at 7, draft an offensive lineman later on, they would still have a much improved offensive line than where it was last year. That would help Levis. That helps the whole offense in general.
I got 2 questions left for Ryan. We have about 2 minutes left with Ryan. So first of all, how many offensive linemen do you think can make a real impact for their team as rookies this year?
All right, let's see here. Let me check my notes here. Joe Alt, you guys talked about the reasons why. I think I like Olaf Ashnu. I haven't ranked higher, but I think 2, 3, 4 years down the road, he could be really good. He feels like a landing spot for the Saints, for example, if they want to trade up, and I think he has a chance to start. Tully Fuaga, right tackle out of Oregon, he's an absolute bruiser. I think he comes in right away and is able to do some things. Troy Fautanu, I talked about him earlier out of Washington. He's a left tackle. Some teams think he moves inside, but I think he's a day 1 starter if you need an offensive lineman. Dallas makes sense there. And then on the other side, or as you kick inside, I should say, Graham Barton's going to be a day 1 starter. Sort of feel like the Steelers are going to be targeting him. Left tackle at Duke, he's going to play guard center at the next level. And then Jackson Powers Johnson, who I love, Rick loves even more, the center from Oregon. I think he's a top 32 pick, and teams think he probably slips out of the first round, which is interesting to me. So what is that, 4, 5, 6 or 7 guys that have a chance to contribute right away as offensive linemen and get a lot of playing time.
Do you like Fautanu better than Latham?
It's close. I do. I think I have him graded a little bit higher. Both can play outside and in. Latham's on the right side, but Latham is also, you know, he blocks out the sun. He's enormous. Troy Fautanu, by the way, he plays, I don't know if you watch closely enough the offensive lineman at Washington, but they wear Adidas uniforms. I know this because I was talking to Troy about this last week, and he wears basically biker shorts. Like, he doesn't have the knee pads in, and they look like biker shorts when he plays. And I didn't care. I didn't notice it. And Rick said, I can't draft someone who wears shorts. So I asked Troy about it. He goes, look, man, the uniform's too tight. And incidentally, every team that he had a meeting with asked him why he was wearing biker shorts. So he had told that story before. So I think the lesson there is that old timers set in their ways think alike about things that no one really should be caring about.
Poor Rick.
Poor Ryan.
Hey, Ryan, thanks a lot, man. What do you have coming up on the With the First Pick podcast?
We're about to do a what we think should happen mock draft in just mere moments. That'll be up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. And then for Tuesday, Adam, we're talking about some of our favorite players in this draft, some guys that we know that everyone knows, and some guys that maybe you don't know that you should know. And then every day from here on out for the rest of the week, we'll be doing something somewhere. So wherever you get With the First Pick or CBSSports.com, we'll be there. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I am so excited to let him go because this earpiece is killing me. I hate this thing. I am a very
You're not used to it.
earpiece.
We used to wear them all the time.
Headphones for me. I'm all about the headphones, so I couldn't wear them today. That's Ryan Wilson. We'll wrap up here in studio. I will say it is difficult to take you seriously. Jamie, all he does is rip me, right? You know, like in person, he just jokes. And I'm standing here, I'm like, having a serious conversation, looking in your eyes. It's weird. I can't wait to get back to my home setup and not have to do this again.
I actually love this.
No, I do too.
This is the throwback.
But isn't it weird to have to take me seriously in person? Yeah.
No, not at all. I haven't been taking you seriously for 15 years.
Where's the yogurt?
I brought you
Ryan
yogurt. Doesn't have to see this part. Ryan should leave.
Yeah, no, I thought Ryan would leave. I thought we'd wrap up.
He's sitting
Ryan,
here talking.
Sign off. You're out of here.
He's out of here.
I brought you yogurt today.
Yeah? Well, it's not here, so I'm not eating it.
Okay. All right. Forget it.
If it arrives within the next, I don't know how much longer.
About 10 seconds.
Yeah.
What happened, Schaefer? Oh, yeah, it doesn't have.
I know where it is.
Dave tried the Greek yogurt that I have. You know, the strawberry, banana, blueberry. He hated it. I'm saying I'm going to make it for you myself.
I'm going to go get it because no one.
No, we're wrapping up.
I'm going to be back.
You tweet about it. For Dave and Jamie and Ryan and Schaefer, I'm Adam. We'll talk to you on Wednesday with another edition. I won't be here. I'll be back on Thursday night after round 1 of the draft. We'll have coverage for you right after the draft ends. So have a good day, everybody. Talk to you soon on Fantasy Football Today.